Ethan Cole had more money than most countries, yet he had never once believed in love. Every embrace he'd ever known came with a price tag, every promise tied to his fortune. He had dated models, actresses, even women who swore they wanted only him, but every time their affection crumbled when he withheld his checkbook. Love, Ethan decided, was nothing more than a clever mask for greed. But even the most cynical men harbor secret hungers, and Ethan's was a single burning question. Was there anyone in this world who could love him without his billions? That question haunted him so deeply that one night he made a choice that would shock the globe. He vanished from his empire and reappeared on the streets, disguised as a beggar. His penthouse lights went dark, his boardroom seat empty, his name erased from tabloids for the first time in decades. He wanted to discover the truth about loyalty and love, but he was playing a game far more dangerous than he imagined. Because the streets didn't play by billionaire rules, there hunger ruled stronger than contracts, betrayal came without warning, and dignity vanished faster than a stock crash. Ethan's decision wasn't born from impulse alone, but from memory. When he was 9 years old, his father lost everything, betrayed by men he called friends. His mother left before the funeral, walking away with another man, abandoning Ethan like a broken investment. That betrayal tattooed itself onto his soul. Never be powerless again, never trust love without proof. By 25 he was a self-made titan, by 35, a billionaire many times over. But at 38 Ethan realized his empire had bought him fear, not loyalty, bodies, not hearts, admirers, not friends. His fortune kept him warm in winter, but it could not silence the echoing emptiness in his chest. The breaking point came late one night outside Titan Tower. Ethan had left a board meeting, pausing when he heard laughter behind him. His directors, glasses raised in celebration, mocked the beggars who camped outside the skyscraper doors. "They're invisible," one scoffed. "Less than shadows." Another sneered, "Give them a suit and they'd still be animals. None of them could last a week in our world." The words sliced through Ethan. He had clawed his way out of poverty, but had he become as heartless as the men he despised? He looked down at the beggars his company towered above. Their faces, weathered and beaten, weren't invisible, they were mirrors. The truth he feared rose like bile. He had wealth but not humanity. That night, staring at his reflection in the penthouse glass, Ethan whispered a vow. He would strip away his fortune, walk into the world as a man with nothing, and test the one thing money could never guarantee: love. But could love survive without truth? Why risk everything when he could lose more than money? What if the answer he found shattered him more than the emptiness ever had? Maya Delgado's mornings began before dawn. While most of the city still dreamed, she was already tying her apron for the breakfast rush at Joe's Diner, balancing trays of coffee and pancakes with weary precision. By noon she was walking briskly across town, exchanging her apron for scrubs at St. Clair's Hospital, where she worked as a nursing assistant. By midnight she returned to a cramped apartment 2 floors above a pawn shop, where her younger brother Luis sat waiting in his wheelchair, his guitar resting on his knees. Her life was a cycle of exhaustion, but she carried it with quiet strength. Every tip she collected, every paycheck she stretched, every extra shift she grabbed wasn't for herself, it was for Luis. He had been only 10 when a hit and run left him paralyzed, his childhood dreams of running the baseball field stolen in an instant. At 20 now he was gentle, bright, and gifted with music. His guitar became both his therapy and his rebellion, the one way he could still feel free. Maya's backstory was written in grief. Their father, a factory worker, died when she was 16 in an accident that made headlines only for a day. A malfunction in the machines. A tragic oversight. The factory was a Titan Global subsidiary, though she didn't know at the time. Their mother, already distant, crumbled under grief and disappeared into the streets with an addiction she never returned from. Maya was left with Luis and a mountain of bills. She became sister, mother, and provider overnight. She hated billionaires. She hated the glass towers that loomed above her neighborhood like monuments built on the backs of the forgotten. To her, the rich didn't just live in another world, they thrived on the suffering of hers. "They don't care if we starve," she once told Luis, adjusting the strap on his wheelchair. "We're nothing but numbers to them. If I ever met one of those billionaires face to face, I'd tell him he should try living like us for just 1 week. He wouldn't last a day." Yet, for all her resentment, Maya still believed in compassion. It was why she shared her sandwiches with the old man who lingered near the hospital steps. Why she slipped extra food into Luis's backpack to give to the homeless veterans who gathered in the park. She didn't have much, but she had enough to give. That contradiction, Resentment toward the wealthy, generosity toward the poor, made her complicated, real. Luis, always the dreamer, teased her. You're too good for this world, Maya. That's why life's so hard on you. She'd laugh, brushing his hair back. No, Luis. That's why I have to be stronger. The world already has enough people who've given up on kindness. Neither of them could have imagined that fate was about to collide with a man whose wealth represented everything Maya despised, yet whose disguise would make her unknowingly share the very last sandwich she owned. Because Ethan Cole, the billionaire she loathed without knowing, had just stepped into her world, not as a king in a glass tower but as a beggar in the shadows. The first night Ethan Cole spent on the streets was colder than any winter in his penthouse. The concrete beneath him felt like ice pressing into his bones, and the stench of rotting trash clung to his clothes. He had worn an old hoodie, torn jeans, and scuffed sneakers bought from a thrift store, his sharp jaw smeared with dirt to dull his identity. He thought anonymity would be liberating, but it was suffocating. In the tower, people bowed to him. Here they didn't even look. On his second day, hunger gnawed at him like a living thing. He hadn't eaten since leaving his penthouse. When he held out a trembling hand for change, pedestrians passed by without meeting his eyes. One woman yanked her child closer as though poverty were contagious. A businessman stepped around him muttering, "Get a job." By nightfall, Ethan had collected only a few coins, barely enough for a stale sandwich. It wasn't just hunger or rejection that shocked him, it was invisibility. He had spent years believing he was untouchable, his face on magazine covers, his voice commanding boardrooms. Now, crouched in the shadows, he was less than nothing. He was proof of what his directors had said, invisible, less than shadows. But the difference was that Ethan felt every humiliation, every sneer. For the first time in decades, he wasn't feared, admired, or envied, he was despised. By the third day he met the others. Caleb, a war veteran with haunted eyes, sat near the underpass telling stories to no one. He shared his cigarette with Ethan, muttering, "Don't let this place eat you alive. The streets test you harder than the battlefield." Sierra, barely 18, wandered barefoot, her arms lined with track marks. She laughed when Ethan asked why she was alone. "Family?" she smirked. "That's just a word people use before they leave." Old man Reggie, his beard tangled and eyes bloodshot, sat with a cardboard sign that read, "I once made 6 figures." When Ethan pressed him, Reggie muttered, "Wall Street. Lost it all. Thought I was untouchable. Now look at me." And then there was Father Raymond, the street priest who carried a Bible older than some of the beggars. He noticed Ethan's discomfort, his stiff posture too refined for someone born to the streets. "You don't belong here," Raymond said quietly. "Not yet. But maybe God dragged you here for a reason." His words landed heavy, as if he could see straight through Ethan's disguise. Every encounter was a mirror. Caleb reminded him of his father's quiet strength. Sierra of his mother's abandonment. Reggie of his own greed. Raymond of his hidden longing for redemption. Ethan had stepped onto the streets to test humanity, but now he was the one being tested. That night, lying awake on the freezing pavement, his stomach hollow and his pride shattered, Ethan whispered into the dark, "Maybe this was a mistake." Yet deep inside, a voice answered, "Or maybe this is the first honest thing you've ever done." He didn't know yet that someone's compassion would soon cut deeper than hunger, and it would come from the very woman whose hatred of billionaires burned brighter than any fire he had ever faced. On the 5th day, Ethan sat slumped against the steps of St. Clair's Hospital, his body aching from sleepless nights and half meals. The city bustled past him, doctors in white coats, patients clutching prescriptions, nurses hustling through revolving doors. He kept his head bowed, his hood pulled low. He wasn't just hiding from recognition, he was hiding from shame. That was when she noticed him. Maya Delgado had just finished her second shift of the day. Her shoulders ached, her eyes burned, and the sandwich in her paper bag was meant to be her only real meal before another sleepless night. She spotted Ethan sitting motionless, his clothes stiff with grime, his face shadowed. At first, she tightened her grip on the bag and kept walking. She'd seen dozens like him. Some were dangerous, some were addicts, some simply hopeless. Compassion was costly and she had nothing to spare. But then she saw it, his hands. His palms were red and blistered, his fingers trembling as if even holding them still cost him energy. Hunger wasn't just written on his face, it screamed through his body. Against her better judgment, she stopped. "Are you hungry?" she asked cautiously. Ethan raised his head slowly. For the first time in years, someone's eyes met his without calculation. No recognition, no agenda. Just suspicion layered with something else, curiosity. He opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. So he nodded once. Maya hesitated only a moment before handing him the sandwich. Here. Don't waste it. Ethan stared at it like it was gold. He wanted to thank her, to say something clever, but when he bit into the sandwich all he could do was chew, tears stinging the corners of his eyes. Maya folded her arms, studying him. You don't look like the others, she said slowly. You sit too straight. You look different. Panic fluttered in Ethan's chest. Had she seen through him already? He forced himself to cough, to slump further. Different doesn't matter when you're starving, he rasped. She frowned, then sighed. Don't get used to it. I don't hand out food every day. I've got my own problems. Still, when she turned to leave, Luis rolled up beside her in his wheelchair, strumming his guitar lightly. Maya, he whispered, nodding toward Ethan, you gave away your dinner again, didn't you? Don't start, she muttered, pushing his chair forward. Ethan watched them go, his heart pounding harder than it had in any board meeting. That girl, she wasn't like anyone else. She didn't look at him as a billionaire because she couldn't. She didn't look at him with pity either. She gave because she had nothing yet still chose to share. He had come to the streets searching for truth, but what he felt in that moment rattled him. An unfamiliar pull toward a stranger who despised the world he came from. That night, as Maya and Luis disappeared into the city's maze, Ethan whispered her name to himself for the first time, though she hadn't told him yet. He didn't know it, but the next time they met, kindness would not come so easily, and the lie he carried would grow heavier with every step. The second time Maya saw Ethan, she nearly walked past him. He was hunched outside Joe's diner, the very place she worked mornings, his hood drawn low, his hands clasped around an empty coffee cup. She hesitated, then muttered under her breath, Don't do it, Maya. She already worked 2 jobs, she couldn't afford to add a third, saving strangers. But Luis, perched in his wheelchair beside her, tilted his head. That's the guy from the hospital, he said softly. The one you fed. Maya groaned, glaring at her brother's too knowing smile. You're impossible. Yet she stopped, handing Ethan the extra muffin she had stashed in her bag. Ethan's eyes flicked up, catching hers. Gratitude flickered across his face, real, raw, unmasked. He wasn't used to saying thank you without power backing the word, but he forced himself to whisper it. Thank you. Maya shrugged. Don't make it a habit. Over the next week, their paths crossed more often. Sometimes outside the hospital, sometimes near the diner, sometimes in the park where Luis strummed his guitar for spare change. Ethan found himself orbiting around them as though gravity itself tugged him closer. One evening, when Luis's wheelchair broke, its wheel jammed from where, Ethan dropped to the ground without hesitation, inspecting the rusted joints with the precision of a man who had once built machines with his father. Within minutes, he had it fixed with nothing but a bent nail and brute force. Luis's eyes widened. Who are you? Ethan forced a chuckle. Just someone who knows a thing or two about stubborn wheels. Maya studied him, her suspicion sharpening. Most people on the streets can't fix a wheelchair like that. You talk different, walk different, you're not like the others. Ethan's chest tightened. He wanted to tell her the truth, but he couldn't, not yet. Does it matter? He asked. It might, Maya answered coldly, though she said nothing more. Despite her suspicion, their connection deepened. Ethan began watching Luis perform in the park, slipping him folded bills when Maya wasn't looking, pretending they came from passing strangers. He found joy in small moments, Luis's laughter, Maya's tired but genuine smile. These were luxuries billions had never bought him. But every kindness he offered cut him deeper. For Maya's father had died in a Titan Global factory accident, a truth Ethan knew but dared not confess. Each time she spoke of her hatred for the rich, each time she spat the word billionaire like a curse, guilt roared louder in his chest. One night, sitting on the curb, Maya told him quietly, the rich think money can buy love, loyalty, even forgiveness. But they're wrong. Love can't be bought, it has to be proven. Her words seared him. Because if she ever discovered who he really was, everything between them would collapse in an instant. As Ethan watched Maya push Luis's wheelchair into the night, a terrifying question haunted him. Was he falling in love with the one woman whose forgiveness he could never afford? While Ethan blended into the shadows, the empire he'd left behind was burning in whispers. Victor Hale, his longtime business rival, circled Titan Global like a shark tasting blood. To the public, Ethan's sudden disappearance looked like recklessness, abandoning boardrooms, missing contracts, leaving investors anxious. Victor seized the moment. Titan's sinking, Victor told the press, his smile sharp as glass. Cole was never the genius, he was just lucky. Now his empire proves it. The word spread across headlines, poisoning Titan's reputation. Stock prices dipped, shareholders panicked, and rumors swirled that Ethan had fled to escape scandal. But Victor wasn't Ethan's only threat. Celine Marlowe, Ethan's ex-lover and a socialite notorious for selling secrets to tabloids, sniffed opportunity in his absence. She remembered the nights Ethan had doubted love, the conversations where he confessed his mistrust of women. If he's vanished, she purred to a gossip magazine, it's because he was betrayed. Or maybe he's hiding a mistress on the side. Her lies spread like wildfire, fueling speculation that Ethan had cracked under pressure, or worse that he was running from shame. Meanwhile, on the streets, Ethan felt the ripples of his old life crashing against his disguise. A discarded newspaper revealed Victor's smear campaign. A late-night radio in the park replayed Celine's venomous words. He clenched his fists, fury boiling in his chest. He had built Titan from nothing, brick by brick, sweat and blood, but in his absence, scavengers were carving it apart. Yet he couldn't return. Not yet. Not while Maya still believed he was a beggar. Not while the truth of her father's death remained buried in the shadows of his empire. His disguise had begun as an experiment, but now it was a prison. The irony was cruel. Victor and Celine wielded his fortune and fame as weapons, while the only people offering him loyalty were those who had nothing. Luis, who trusted him with his broken wheelchair, and Maya, who fed him with her last sandwich. Still, danger grew closer. A paparazzo, searching alleys for scandal shots, snapped a blurry picture of Ethan sitting beside Maya and Luis in the park. At first, no one recognized the gaunt, hooded figure. But Celine's trained eye saw the jawline, the hands too clean for a true vagrant. She leaned over the photo, smiling wickedly. "That's him," she whispered. "He's hiding as one of them." If the world discovered the truth before Ethan could reveal it himself, the fallout would destroy not only Titan but also Maya's trust. Because how could she forgive him when she realized he had turned her life into a cruel social experiment? The trap was closing. And Maya, unknowingly, stood in the center of it, her kindness turning into the most dangerous vulnerability of all. The night air was heavy, the kind that pressed down on the skin and made every sound feel sharper. Ethan sat with Maya and Luis in the park, Luis plucking soft chords on his guitar, the melody fragile yet beautiful. Streetlights flickered overhead, casting their faces in shifting shadows. Ethan's heart thudded in his chest. He had rehearsed the words 100 times. "Maya, I'm not who you think I am." He wanted to tell her everything, about Titan Global, about Victor, about the empire crumbling without him. Most of all, he wanted to confess that the billionaire she despised had been sitting at her side all along. Maya glanced at him, catching the storm in his eyes. "You've been quiet," she said softly. "Quieter than usual." Ethan swallowed hard. This was his chance. He could either bury the truth deeper or set it free. His hands shook as he clasped them together. "Maya," he began, his voice raw, "there's something I need to tell you." She tilted her head, suspicion flickering. "What is it?" But before he could speak, Luis interrupted with a grin. "Don't ruin the moment. Look at this." Maya actually sitting still for once. He strummed a playful tune, his laughter spilling into the night. Maya rolled her eyes but smiled, ruffling his hair. The confession caught in Ethan's throat. He forced a smile, pretending the moment hadn't been broken, though inside he was unraveling. Later, when Luis went to speak with another street musician, Maya turned back to Ethan. Her eyes were steady, probing. "You're hiding something," she said. His chest tightened. "Why do you think that?" "Because you don't talk about your past. Everyone on the streets has a story. Caleb has his war. Sierra has her scars. Even Reggie tells me about his old Wall Street days. But you're a blank page. Too clean. Too deliberate." Ethan looked away, fear clawing at his ribs. "Maybe my story's not worth telling." Maya leaned closer, her voice low. "Or maybe it's the one story you're afraid I won't forgive." Her words cut so deep, Ethan almost gasped. She didn't know how close she was to the truth. He wanted to grab her hands, to plead with her to understand, to tell her that everything he'd done, every lie, every disguise, was for love. But then Luis called them over, breaking the tension. Maya rose, leaving Ethan in silence, his confession swallowed again by fear. As he watched her walk away, he realized the truth wasn't just about him anymore. It was about her father, her hatred of billionaires, the pain his empire had unknowingly caused. If he confessed now, he wouldn't just risk her rejection. He might destroy the fragile bond keeping her world together. Yet the longer he stayed silent, the bigger the explosion would be when the truth inevitably surfaced. And in the shadows, Celine's paparazzo photograph was already making its way to Victor Hale, who saw not just scandal, but a weapon sharp enough to cut Ethan down forever. The news broke like a storm. Billionaire disguised as beggar spotted in City Park. The headline blared across every screen. The grainy photograph of Ethan, hood drawn low, sitting beside Maya and Luis, was plastered on websites and morning broadcasts. The world gasped, half in fascination, half in outrage. Victor Hale stoked the fire, smirking at the cameras. Ethan Cole treats human lives like experiments. While his company collapses, he parades in the streets, mocking the poor with his charade. If this is his idea of leadership, Titan deserves to fall. Celine chimed in, crocodile tears glistening. I loved Ethan once, but this? Pretending to be one of them just to see if anyone could love him? It's cruel. It's heartless. It proves he never cared for anyone but himself. By dusk, the story had exploded worldwide. Protesters gathered outside Titan Tower. Commentators argued whether Ethan's act was social genius or unforgivable exploitation. Words like narcissist, manipulator, and sociopath trended online. And then the story reached Maya. She came home from a double shift, Luis already glued to the tiny TV in their apartment. The photo filled the screen. Her hands went cold, the bag of groceries slipping from her grip. The man in the photo, the beggar she had fed, trusted, maybe even begun to love, was Ethan Cole. The very billionaire she despised. Luis turned toward her, eyes wide with confusion. Maya, it's him. Her chest tightened like a vice. Memories cascaded through her mind. The first sandwich, the repaired wheelchair, the quiet nights in the park. All of it a lie. Her anger erupted before the sorrow could catch up. He used us, Luis. He used me. When Ethan appeared at her door that night, desperation in his eyes, she nearly slammed it shut. Maya, please, let me explain. Explain? Her voice cracked, sharp with betrayal. You lied every single day. You made me pour my heart out to a stranger while you sat there, laughing inside, knowing you were the very man I hated most. Ethan's shoulders sagged. I wasn't laughing. I was searching. I needed to know if love could exist without money. If someone could see me, not my billions, not Titan, just me. Her eyes filled with fire. And you chose me for your experiment? Do you have any idea who you are to me? My father died in one of your factories. My whole life has been cleaning up the wreckage of your empire. And you thought you could test me like some rat in your lab? The silence between them was suffocating. Ethan's lips parted, but no words could bridge the abyss. For the first time since leaving his tower, he felt true powerlessness. Not from hunger, not from shame, but from losing the one person who made him believe love might be real. Maya's final words struck harder than any boardroom betrayal. You wanted the truth, Ethan? Here it is. I could have loved the beggar. But I'll never forgive the billionaire. She shut the door, and the sound echoed like a gavel striking judgment. Ethan Cole had faced hostile takeovers, courtroom battles, and billion-dollar gambles. But nothing compared to the silence that followed Maya's door slamming shut. It was not just rejection, it was obliteration. For the first time he understood what it meant to be stripped of power, not by poverty but by truth. The world outside only sharpened his fall. Titan Global bled as Victor Hale twisted the knife deeper, convincing investors to abandon ship. Celine leaked private photos, love letters, even voicemails Ethan had once sent her, spinning the story of a man unhinged, reckless, and cruel. His empire teetered like a skyscraper in an earthquake. And the streets, once his quiet refuge, turned hostile. Other beggars who had shared cigarettes and laughter now spat at him. Caleb snarled, "You came down here to play dress-up with our pain. You think suffering is a costume?" Sierra hurled a bottle, screaming, "We bleed for real, you fraud." Even Father Raymond, who had once looked at him with patience, now shook his head in quiet disappointment. "The truth sets men free, Ethan," he said gravely, "but lies burn bridges to ash." The betrayal cut deepest with Luis. The boy who had laughed with him, who trusted his help with the wheelchair, now refused to meet his eyes. "You gave me money and pretended it was strangers," Luis said bitterly. "You wanted me to believe in kindness, but it was all your guilt in disguise." His guitar, once a symbol of hope, lay silent. Everywhere Ethan turned, doors closed. The beggar community rejected him. The boardroom exiled him. And Maya, the only person whose forgiveness could heal him, had cast him out. He was both too poor for the rich and too rich for the poor, belonging nowhere. One evening he sat alone on the same hospital steps where he had first tasted Maya's sandwich. His stomach was full, he could have returned to his penthouse any time, but he had never felt emptier. The irony stabbed him. He had descended into the streets to find love without money, but in doing so he had lost both. The headlines screamed louder by the day. Coal empire collapses. Beggar billionaire scandal deepens. Victor Hale named new face of Titan Global. He had gambled his fortune for truth, and truth had left him ruined. But ruin, Ethan realized, was not the end. It was fire. And fire had a way of burning away the lies to reveal what truly endured. He had lost Maya's trust, Titan's crown, and his reputation. All that remained was the raw man beneath, the boy who once held his father's hand in a broken factory, swearing he'd never be powerless again. Now, stripped of everything, Ethan faced the choice his billions had always shielded him from: surrender to the ashes or rise from them. And though he didn't know it yet, the path he chose would lead to a final twist so devastating, it would not just change his story, it would force Maya, Luis, and the entire world to question what love and forgiveness truly meant. The city buzzed with Ethan Cole's ruin. Titan Global was Victor Hale's playground now. Maya avoided even speaking his name, and the streets whispered his disgrace like a cautionary tale. Yet Ethan, stripped of everything, made one final decision. If the world had judged him as a monster, then he would at least leave it with the truth. He arranged a press conference, not in a gleaming tower, but in the very park where Maya and Luis once shared their evenings. The media swarmed, cameras flashing. Ethan stood in ragged clothes, refusing the tailored suit his lawyers begged him to wear. "I lied," he said plainly, his voice carrying over the crowd. "I disguised myself as a beggar. I tested the poor for kindness. I tested strangers for love. And in doing so I failed them all. I became the very man I despised, using people to prove a point. But the truth isn't about Titan Global or Victor Hale or even me. The truth is about Maya Delgado." Gasps rippled through the reporters. Ethan went on, voice cracking. "Her father died in one of my factories. My company's negligence stole her family's future. And still she gave me her last sandwich. Still she treated me with dignity when I deserved nothing. She doesn't just represent love without money, she represents forgiveness without limits. If you want a hero, look at her. Not me." The crowd erupted with questions, microphones shoved forward, but Ethan stepped down, leaving the world stunned. For once he didn't care about perception, only honesty. That night he returned to the hospital steps, the place where their story began. Maya found him there not because she wanted to but because Luis insisted. "He's broken, Maya," Luis said. "And maybe broken people deserve one more chance." Her eyes were steel when she faced Ethan. "You humiliated me. You turned my life into a spectacle. Why should I forgive you?" Ethan met her gaze, tears streaking his face. "You shouldn't. But I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm asking for a chance to live differently. To build, not destroy. To give back everything I took." Silence hung between them. Then Maya whispered, "Love can't be tested, Ethan. It has to be trusted." She turned to leave, her hand tightening on Luis's wheelchair, when Father Raymond approached, holding a worn envelope. He pressed it into Maya's hand. "Your father left this the week he died. I was asked to keep it safe until the time was right." Maya tore it open. Inside, in her father's scrawled handwriting, were words that made her knees buckle. "If anything happens to me, don't blame Ethan Cole. He was the only one who fought for safer conditions. The company overruled him. Remember, sometimes the richest man in the room is also the loneliest." Maya's breath caught. The truth twisted everything. Ethan hadn't killed her father's hope. He had been the only one who tried to save it. Tears blurred her vision as she looked at him again, her hatred colliding with the possibility of something else: understanding. The story didn't end with forgiveness nor with love, but with a haunting question left hanging between them, echoing into every heart that heard it. If you discovered the person you hated most had been fighting for you all along, could you ever love them?